Episode 10 of the Ethnically podcast. And on today's episode, I'm joined by Sofia Azam. Now, Sofia is founder of Ignite Quals. She has a background in EDI and in entrepreneurship, and she's founder and roadshow producer of Skills for Startups and ex-chair of CMI RCC. So it's a pleasure to have Sofia on the podcast today. Sofia, how are you doing?
I'm okay, thank you, Adarsh. It's a real pleasure to be here talking to you about all things equity, diversity, inclusion. So it's such a great opportunity for me to discuss my passions and my business and what underpins my business.
No, definitely. We were just talking offline about building ethically as a business, and obviously it's my passion, and it's great to meet someone that also has that passion. So, without further ado, I'll kickstart the questions. I was really interested in obviously reading your profile and story, and I'm sure all our listeners would love to hear
Yeah.
if you could tell us a bit more about your personal journey and what kind of started your passion for EDI and starting Ignite Quals, for example.
There is a long journey here from childhood and my schooling background, which is state schooling. And there has been always that passion as a youngster wanting to do something great with my life, and especially for those who are disadvantaged across the United Kingdom. And I remember one of the key milestones in my life was when I was 17 years old. I was studying for my AS levels, and I had the opportunity to enter a competition with World Vision, which does incredible work in Africa and parts of the Middle East, looking at children's welfare and children's education. And I did quite a lot of work with World Vision in terms of fundraising throughout my teens. And so I submitted this essay, and essentially I thought nothing of it. And it was all about what are the solutions to alleviating poverty across Africa and globally as well, wider. And one of the key things I put in my essay is that the real weapon to stop this cycle of deprivation is education and the power of education and
Yeah,
good schooling and giving people the opportunity to, it doesn't matter where you are, you could be in the remote village with absolute poverty, but there has to be an opportunity there and a light at the end of the tunnel and hope for those people. And there's always hope and a choice to get yourself out of that poverty. And we need to be building a planet here where we are outward thinking, not inward thinking.
yeah,
And that our neighbors and our neighboring countries, we need to look out for what is going on in those countries from policy perspective, from our government perspective. And I won the competition. I was one of 11 who won the competitions, and it was a solutions driven essay. And I had the opportunity to present this essay to Tony Blair and Bill Clinton. About the time my passport had expired.
oh,
So I couldn't, and this was the biggest hit from my mom and my dad, who was in Pakistan at the time, who said, "You need to renew your passport." And I hadn't realized that I was going to win. And I needed to travel to Africa in 24 hours to the ILO conference to present this essay to the world leaders, along with other 10 17-year-olds who also entered. And World Vision were very gutted because it was such a powerful message that I sent out around community and collectivism and building ecosystems to alleviate deprivation. And that's the only way, I think that's the only power that there is. It's the power of the people that can support people through trauma and disaster, and any other sort of godly act like an earthquake that can really impact people's livelihoods. And so they decided to publish the essay in their magazine, which went out to thousands and thousands of members. And for me, that was such a great accomplishment. And that started my journey into, I either was going to go into education or was going to go into health. And I ended up studying politics and was part of all the issues in this country. I've always been quite an activist in this country. I was a young youth parliamentarian at one point under Tony Blair. So every Wednesdays, we youngsters would go to the House of Lords, and we'll debate on drug issues, all sorts.
mm,
And then my first job was with the civil service, and I did work for CQC, what is called CQC now, but back then it was called the Commission for Social Care and Inspection. And that opened up doors in social care and the problems in the social caring system. And then I did branch into the education system and work with the exams regulator. And that's the reason why I've gone and done it myself and built an educational establishment for young people to give young people a chance. Because I believe that if I wasn't given the opportunities I was given as a teenager, I had a great English teacher that taught me a lot about the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King's history, and Nelson Mandela's. All of this shaped my mindset, and it led to Ignite Quals. It led to Ignite Quals group. Then it's gone on and it's led to Skills for Startups and our other sister company. And there is a huge social impact ethos to this commercial model. And I think it's okay to be commercial and have use those the pursuit of profit for a greater purpose. And that's exactly what these three startups are going to do in the next 10 years. We are going to be using we are going to be attracting ethical partnerships, diverse partnerships. We're going to promote equality across the spectrum using the power of education and skills. We want to see more fresh leaders at CEO level that are diverse because I think when you have diversity, which we do on our boards, we have so much power of knowledge. It's unbelievable.
Mm.
We have two advisory boards at the moment, and the power that's coming through from all these companies that have come on board from different backgrounds, different experiences, it has shaped my business mindset and my business acumen.
Yeah, no, I think sorry, I thought you were gonna continue that. No, that's it's incredible to hear, like, how your experiences as a teenager impacted your career decisions, which
Yeah.
sounds crazy to say, but I think a lot of people, when they're young, they're still navigating life and thinking about
No,
what they want to do. But I think your passions and your lived experiences,
yeah.
your career choices, which I think
Yeah.
is really interesting. I was going to say as well, I think from my point of view, I think when we talk about EDI and diversity, I think my perspective and why one of the reasons I set up Ethnically is I think that diversity, equity, inclusion is the number one solution to every single problem in the world. I've,
Absolutely.
I'm a believer in that.
Absolutely. And what equity, diversity, inclusion, where we can get it right is when we discuss equity, diversity, inclusion in a teaching context.
Mm,
A lot of people are afraid to talk about race, misogyny in this country and worldwide. We still have those issues in businesses where people are reluctant to say that situation was misogynistic or that situation was racist or that situation is exclusive and it's not bringing in diverse communities to a particular policy or a situation. I think it's very important that equity, diversity, inclusion is at the forefront of every business model, at the forefront of every schooling system, and the heart and soul of education. I think we have to lead the way as educationalists. I think if we're not doing it, then there's no hope for this planet.
mm,
But if educationists are getting it wrong and they have their own unconscious bias and prejudices, then we've got the wrong people in the education system. And that's going to trickle down to students and learners in this country. And they will have that mindset. We have such a power when we're teaching kids for them to, the family institute is important, but so is the education institute. And then when you go onto your careers, in the career ecosystem and the business ecosystem, if your parents have a very narrow-minded mindset, it doesn't mean your children are going to have narrow-minded mindset. They can be reshaped through education. And that's why I think equity, diversity, inclusion is so powerful in terms of prosperity, not just for the UK economy, but globally.
no, 100%. I think when I look at Ignite Quals and moving on to learning a bit more about the business, I definitely think that education and EDI is built throughout the business and having done my research and reading on Ignite Quals. So if you could tell the audience, like, what is the aim of Ignite Quals in terms of igniting that learning potential? Thank
Yeah.
you. And what's the plans for like growth and
Absolutely, Adash. Ignite Quals is a very exciting concept. It started under COVID-19 in Dubai when the work dried up because assessment stopped. I was a consultant for various award organizations and I looked at compliance with around courses and qualifications that really mean something to young people today. That really develops a particular skill that gets them quite easily into a quality job, not just any job, but not a dead end job, but
mm,
quality. That's what youngsters are looking for. Ignite Quals' mission is to create more quality careers on the back of looking at new skills that the world requires. And AI is a brand new expertise, and that's really hyped up at the moment. And what Ignite Course wants to do is give young people and now young leaders and entrepreneurs, as it's evolved into, a fair chance, an equitable chance of learning. You shouldn't have to have barriers. Teaching shouldn't be about selecting some learners over others. and
Mm,
ignoring the kids at the back of the classroom. What Ignite Quals is saying is that if you didn't do that well in school, we do have these products and courses that can really shape your soft skills. We think soft skills is the key to successful equity, diversity, inclusion. It's that character we're building, the behaviors, the confidence. You don't get taught that
mm,
at your academic point in your life where you're doing GCSEs, A levels, then you go on to degree. So our products and our courses, and we have over 100 unique products that we've researched and fully backed with data, is looking at soft skills and business skills, because we do believe that those who probably didn't do it that well at school probably make the best business leaders in this country.
mm,
You just don't, they have the brightest ideas when you talk to them. They probably didn't get a single GCSE. They work with the youth hostels, or they're part of some sort of program, or that they've just slipped out of the net. These are the people we want to be attracting into Ignite Quals and onto our courses moving forward. And we've started to do that through Skills for Startups, where we've attracted young people that have ideas for businesses. Some may have done a business GCSE or a business undergraduate degree, but are still very much underconfident about the practicalities of building a business, running a business, and growing a business. You don't get taught that in the purest sense. And what I've been researching for the last 3 years is pure skills needed for young people, all young people, but particularly also diverse people that are a little bit underconfident about reaching for the stars because they've been told to be at the back of the classroom, or they've been told that you're already disadvantaged, aren't you? You could be a son of an immigrant family or a daughter of an immigrant family. They've never been in business probably. They probably have been working in manual labor. Predominantly, that's where my parents are at.
mm,
So for me to get to this point, I had to come out of my shell. And I had to say, actually, I'm not an Asian woman. I'm a human being. And as a human being, I have a right um, to dream and have an idea. And Ignite Quals was a dream. It was an idea that was built under COVID-19 through desperation as well, because we didn't know whether we were going to ever come out of COVID-19, what was going to happen. So I had this idea to build something for diverse communities that have fallen through the education net, to look at building that back their confidence and getting them back into some sort of career or even further education, because they could have fallen out of education or fallen out of love of education. Some kids have been telling me that they're not in love with traditional academia or standardized way of being tested because their minds work differently, or they're neurodiverse,
mm.
or they have ADHD, dyslexia. Nobody thinks about elements when we're looking at traditional academia. Ignite Quals wants to change that and reshape that. And we did have a chance to talk about Ignite Quals at the House of Lords under Gillian Keegan. And we did say, look, it is an alternative establishment, and it's looking at that grey area where no one is, these youngsters are not in employment or in education. They need to be given a chance at a livelihood, at a life. And that's where that's where this passion has come through, building this um, social impact business for the communities.
It's amazing to hear. Like, I think obviously I'm a big lover of social impact. That's my passion as well. And I think hearing you speak about the education system, as someone that's recently gone through it, I completely agree. I think it is very outdated. And when I look at some schools, I always think about like results day, and I think it's always celebrated the kids that do well and the kids that get to Oxford and Cambridge,
Yeah,
kids that get all A stars. But I think it overshadows those kids didn't get the grades, or and
yeah,
that doesn't mean anything to do with if they're a failure or. And I think that's something that I think is one of the biggest
no,
pitfalls of the education system. We don't talk about
no,
when kids don't do well and how to pick yourself up or how to
yeah,
move on or pivot your career direction. If you
yeah.
did university or degree apprenticeship that you wanted, how do you pivot that? So I really want with a follow-up question actually, and you mentioned Skills for Startups, your sister organization. When it comes to skills and you mentioned the soft skills, what are the key skills when you say that are the focus of Skills for
I
Startups that you want to really bring in on for young people?
Absolutely. I think the biggest issue is, and it always has been even pre COVID-19, because of technology and the overuse of technology. And technology is great, by the way, because we use technology and we are about to go through a digital transformation over the next few years. But it's communication because we are on our phones. Youngsters are on their phones and on their laptops and on computers, and the language has changed.
Yeah.
And we communicate and articulate how we write. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We
Mm.
write clearly in full sentences. You often talk how you write. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
That's it.
So when you're using emojis 100% of the time in your language and short text, we find that some of these youngsters perhaps wouldn't do well in interviews or certainly for a typical average job. There'll be a lot of slang being used because that's what the new generation are using at the moment. When you use communication through technology like mobile phones and Snap and Instagram and all sorts of. So for me, what we want to go back to basics with these young people around fuller sentences and when you're orally talking, what it means to get your message across with impact, because that could secure you your next career and or your next business deal if you're going into
Mm.
entrepreneurship. And so communication is a great soft skill that was lost pre-COVID-19, but under COVID-19 it became even worse when you became isolated, and especially youngsters who couldn't really interact in person anymore in parks or in the schooling environment or a college environment. That also impacted people's language orally and also how we write as well now. I think that is huge at the moment, but also our behaviors and our confidence levels. These are underrated soft skills because our behaviors can really have a huge impact in the workplace and
Mm.
even in when you're going into university or if you're in a college environment. It's very important to teach team skills, to teach about praise and about thank you, empathy, all of these traits you typically do look for when you're hiring people at within your companies. Is that what's their level of empathy? What's their level of gratitude? What's their level of community spirit and team spirit? You just don't get that level of understanding unless you really teach these soft skills to say, actually, these are mandatory to get through life. As a typical citizen of this country, people are more attracted to people who respectful and respect. And this is all linked to equity, diversity, inclusion because equity, diversity, inclusion is about respecting different religions, different ethnicity, and when you start to build those soft skills for young people at that right age, whether it's post A levels or pre university or post university, because you just don't pick up those skills, it can really drum up that appetite for equity, diversity, inclusion by default because been taught that it's important as part of your skills at that right age.
Yeah. When you were mentioning some of those skills, actually, for me, made me think about emotional intelligence.
Yeah,
And kind of
absolutely.
a lot of those skills are like in that sort of field of
Yeah,
if I was to class those skills, I'd probably say they're all
yeah,
emotional intelligence. And I agree. You don't get taught that
yeah.
at
And I
school
also
or at
think we need to
university.
be teaching it's okay to cry. One of our
100%.
courses, I've been looking at emotions and why can't we cry in the workplace? Why can't we cry in university? If something goes wrong or we are in pain, why can't we teach ourselves it's okay to cry? It's okay to cry in the workplace. Why is it unprofessional to show your emotions? I think that's the next decade. I truly believe it is about humanity. It's about showing your human side, because I think that is a true success measure. I think for me, that leads to success when you're real.
Yeah.
People are going to want to be led by you.
Yeah. I think that's really I don't know how I say it's really powerful all the time, but this is honestly it's so powerful to hear like those skills and those like being authentic, I think is so important and I think it's
It's
so
so-
underrated. And I think when I think about the workplace, even when I've had previous jobs, I just try and be myself. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm obviously there's things I can work on, but I just when I go into the workplace and I speak to other people, I can just tell they're not there's something missing. Authentic. I
Yeah,
don't think there's nothing authentic about them. It's just because they're in the workplace environment,
exactly.
it
Yeah,
triggers them to be like that. That makes sense.
yeah. But if you think about it, if you're a chief executive officer and you want to appoint people that are a little bit more clinical robotic, That's fine. I'm not saying it's wrong because there is a place for people who are a little bit like that and perhaps don't show their emotions and probably only show it to their families when they go home. Where in the workplace they have a different sort of demeanor. But I find that the most successful organizations are those that allow for generosity and
Mm.
humor. And often those CEOs are like that. They're humorous
Right.
and they get the best productivity. They get the KPIs hit. And you find that they are very prosperous because people are saying, we love the environment. We don't ever want to leave this CEO. We don't ever want to leave this environment because we can be ourselves. And that, what a skill. And you know what? That doesn't happen. You've got to teach at a very young age that if you want to be a CEO in 30 years' time, this is the type of CEO that's going to get you the results. And it's going to create a nice, authentic, positive culture, a one of total inclusivity at the highest level because you've allowed for a different skill set. You've allowed for differences and different mindsets and different people with different knowledges and experiences. And I think that's the true indicator of a successful business model, I think.
Mm. No, definitely. And I think it's very important to address that as well. I think when we're talking about future leaders, I think we're
Yeah.
seeing it already in some entrepreneurs and leaders that I can notice in society.
Yeah.
They have obviously like the rise of building your own personal brand. You can see the person
Yeah.
behind the leader and the human behind the
Yeah.
leader, which I think is going to continue growing. I think it's going to
Yeah.
be a thing
Yeah.
that if you're a CEO or leader and you don't have a big social presence or you don't have a, I don't know, a way of captivating your audience, I think it's like a given now. You need to be
Yeah.
in my opinion, when you become a leader or someone focused on social impact.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's something that, having done my research and obviously listening to you, you're embedding a lot in Ignite Quals. So my next question was in terms of EDI, and I know you got Ignite Quals call it EDIB.
Yeah, we do.
What are and B being for belonging for those that were unaware. How does that sort of benefit learners and from diverse backgrounds? How do you not instill is the wrong word? How do you say instill or ensure that learners that come to Ignite Quals are building those traits of EDIB?
Yeah, so essentially we're probably doing it more through the sister companies now. So the groups has an overarching agenda that is engineering EDNIB across Skills for Starters on EduEco plus the two sister companies. And that's been connecting us to the Gen Z community and fresh young entrepreneurs needing soft skills and business skills. And we're part of several communities now. Thousands now know about Ignite Course Group, Skills Starters on EduEco Plus. And we found that essentially these young entrepreneurs, they are already purpose led because they are techie and they're bringing about a whole new tech revolution. And it's about fixing the world. It's about fixing problems in this country. Equity, diversity, inclusion, belonging is almost like a heart and core of what they already are doing. And what we do is essentially what I have been doing for several very young entrepreneurs and their startups at the moment is teaching them through our sort of one-to-one sessions and our sort of interactions with them around looking at being the next generation of leaders that educates others that it's okay to dream and break that glass ceiling. So we've got several young female entrepreneurs that just 6 months into their startups and women find it very tough in the business world at the moment. And it's a massive ED&I issue. But what I've done is really through the power of marketing and public relations have made them feel comfortable that it's okay to be a woman. It's okay to be Asian. It's okay to be black. It's okay to be who you are. And it's okay for you to then go and pursue your growth measures for your company. And often it just really takes somebody like me who looks Asian and does have the skill, the education background to give them that confidence. And this is what Skills for Startups is all about because we've designed our mentorship program, which includes humanism and humanity and human centric strategies for startups. And this next year is being launched. And this is going to be a groundbreaking for diverse startups because when you're starting out, you do what your parents do, you're humble and you don't put yourself out there. You sometimes feel guilty that you've come up with something great and you don't know why you feel guilty. We want to remove that through our mentorship program. We want to say, actually, you have a right to dream this idea. You have a right to be the next L'Oreal or the next Lord Alan Sugar. I know there's not enough more role models out there, but you could be that role model if you break that sort of barrier that you've already set in your head that you shouldn't be doing this. Does that make sense? So
Mm,
equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging, the something that belonging side is you've got to belong. If you're going to start a business as a young entrepreneur and you want to educate yourselves with the right skills to flourish, then you have to have that mindset that you belong in the first instance. If you want to, if you go in, I think it's Steve Bartlett who said in his podcast the other day that if I went into the boardroom with my Primark shirt and everything, and I thought I'm not going to get the deal because I'm black, because I'm in my early 20s and I'm black. And all these middle-aged white men, women are not going to take me seriously. Then I'm responsible for not getting that. I'm responsible for having that mindset. I'm accountable to walking into that boardroom negatively, thinking already that they're not going to invest in me. So that is what we want to change through our mentoring program. We want to say when you walk into the boardroom, walk into your first interview at entry level, if you're not going to university or if you're post university, your mindset should be you have a right to that job. You have a right, you have the skills, you have to have the confidence. And that's where the soft skill products come in. Because when we're building those behaviors and confidence, which you often don't see in other courses because it's teaching some sort of technical element, that's the whole purpose. What we're saying through our products is come to Ignite Quals because if you're very low down and you think that there's nothing going on in your life and your life is very difficult, you come from a diverse background, you feel a disadvantage, you have been disadvantaged throughout your life, we can pick you up. And when you walk into that interview or that business deal, you're not thinking you're disadvantaged. And I think that was very powerful what Steve said, because that's exactly what we've been educating for the last 3 years from under COVID-19 to say, let's start having confidence here now. And
mm.
if people are your barriers, isn't that their problem though?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like a double-edged sword kind of way in a way, because I agree with you in the sense that for me personally, I put the barriers of ethnicity on myself or race, and I think that's a case for a lot of young people or a lot of people from, I don't like saying ethnic minority anymore, but from ethnic diverse communities, which is obviously a problem. But it's also why through ethnically, I want to celebrate the differences, but not make the differences the reason to be different, if that makes sense, or
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
cause
That,
tension. It
I,
should be thing that makes you stand out, and you should be celebrating it. And that's why I wanted to set up ethnically. It's about celebrating diversity and not making diversity the point of everything. If that,
no. And the thing is, we're going to get to that point, I think. And maybe I am being a tiny bit idealistic here, but we are going to come to that point where I don't think race or anything is going to be an issue. I think
mm,
we are going to be at that point where hopefully in the next decade or so, we talk about humanity and we
yeah,
talk about how selfish are we on the spectrum? How selfless are we? Are we holding doors for people who need those doors open? It's going to be more around that holistic general behavior and conduct across the globe, which really is going to be quite pivotal for the next generation to look up to. I don't think we are going to be specifically having those discussions around race. And I think social class will always be there in the background. There's always going to be that class situation. But I think if we can influence the government and to get it right, then I think everybody can have an equal chance at a fantastic life on this planet. And when we do die, and eventually we will, we want to leave the planet in such a way where the next generation, our children's children, they don't face what we've
yeah.
faced. It almost becomes like they, by default, the moment they are born on planet Earth, that they are cherished for who they are.
No, definitely. And I guess, yeah, that feeling of being cherished and understanding.
Yeah.
Actually, there was when you were talking about female entrepreneurs, it reminded me of a conversation I had. Actually, my first episode of Ethnically, I was with. She calls herself a mompreneur, and her name's
Yeah.
Linda Attram, and she was talking about mother's guilt as being an entrepreneur. Like the biggest thing that she feels is the mother's guilt because she feels I want to build like from her perspective, and she talks to loads of other mums that are entrepreneurs as well. That they feel guilt of not being there for their children and not having that giving that support or being the so-called mother that they need to be because
Yeah.
they're focused on their business or they're focused on, yeah, building their business or being an entrepreneur. And she talks a lot about mother's guilt, and it just reminded me when you said, like, that guilt that probably a lot of
Yeah.
female founders find,
The
and
guilt doesn't start when you're married and you're a mother. And I think men have guilt as well because men feel that they're not spending enough time with their kids because they're the breadwinner, or traditionally they are. But the guilt starts when you're younger. I think it's something inside us where we're taught that we can't be overconfident or we can't be confident or it can put people off. And we always do, even ourselves, we are our own worst enemies sometimes where we don't like people being confident. We praise them and then when they make one error, we build
bring it
them
down.
up and we bring
Yeah.
them down. The media is solely responsible for that sort of behavior and conduct, and then that perpetuates through our own. We start to believe the media, and
Mhm.
we are guilty of that. And I think we need to move away from that negativity and that negative positions where we're very quick to judge. And I think if we remove the judgment, then I think people won't feel guilty about where they are with their careers or your business aspirations. I think did you say Lyndon Barrett?
Linda Attram.
Oh, sorry, I thought you said
Yeah.
Linda Barrett because I thought I was going to say I think I know her.
Mhm.
No, but yes, she sounds like a lovely lady, and I don't think she needs to feel guilty about anything. I think if I was her daughter or son, I'd be proud of my mom being a mom. What was it?
100%.
Mom,
Mompreneur.
yeah. I'd be proud because I'd go to school and say my mom has her own business. So there's nothing to feel guilty about because you're teaching
Yeah.
kids that it's a valuable skill.
Yeah, and like you said, it's a mindset thing, and when you're talking
Yeah.
about confidence as well, I guess it applies to all entrepreneurs and all startup founders, whether they have that confidence to be themselves and be authentic, which we were talking about. That's actually well, that actually links to my next question actually, in terms of for startup, whether you're a young founder or founder in general, what sort of advice do you have for those that want to continue building their business? And say, for example, their biggest barrier is themselves, if that makes sense. What advice would you give to them?
My advice to new startup founders and the new generation coming into the business world is that expect the unexpected and prepare. You might have an idea. All we had was Ignite Quals. 3 years ago, all we had was Ignite Quals. Little did we know that through different factors and risks, and sometimes being forced into changing, we reevaluated and evolved into Skills for Startups and EduEco Plus. So my biggest message to everyone starting out is just because you start with one idea doesn't mean that's the idea you're going to end up with. So be
Yeah.
prepared to be flexible and adapt because there are risks out there in the business world. And you are going to be new to the market. So you're going to be competing with companies that perhaps are already doing what you're doing. My second advice is that make sure that your idea is not like everybody else's. And I know it's that difficult, that's really difficult. And it's a difficult skill to have. And we are going to be teaching that next year in our mentorship program. How to have that unique selling point, how to ensure that you consistently, persistently are different from every other product or service or process on the market. Because that's what the investor will be asking. Why you and what makes you so different? And you will find that. You will find your own journey and you will find your own space in the market. And when you do, you have to protect it and you have to understand everything about trademarks and really protecting that product out there. So it's very important that when you put all those hours in to launch an idea, that you do protect your idea and you ensure that you are consistently evolving in that space and being ahead of the game. Thirdly, you must have grit. You cannot be a successful startup and founder and not have thick skin and not have that resilience because there are going to be rejections. Investors are going to play with your mindset. People, partnerships, who you're attracted to, want to go into business with. There's always going to be people there that want to get as much out of you as possible with you being left with very little. And you've got to have grit and resilience to hold on to your business and really establish and protect the vision and keep that vision pure before you start bringing in shareholders,
Yeah.
before you start bringing those partnerships, and always go with partnerships that mirror your values. Don't lose your values because at the end of the day, that's what makes you different in the market is your values.
Yeah.
That's your foundation.
That's amazing advice. I think I can definitely take a lot of that forward, and I'm sure a lot of listeners will definitely be taking some of that advice forward. Actually, this is going to sound like a quite interesting question, right? But given the advice you've given,
Yeah.
how has Ignite Quals sort of done that, if that makes sense? So how have where if what examples have you as a founder yourself, Sophia, showed grit, had to evolve, or expect the unexpected?
I think for me, it has been a very difficult journey because I worked as a civil servant, I worked in government. I worked for Ofqual, which is most prestigious exams regulator in this country. And I've gone out. I'm probably the only one that has left Ofqual and built an education establishment. So I've made history.
Mm.
And I've had barriers to say, "Oh, you're a civil servant. This is different." When you set up your own award organization, different size, different skill set than education regulation. You're having to be regulated. You're going to be audited. So you're going to be on the receiving end of what you used to do for the government. And I've had to, yeah, I have to show a lot of resilience. To be honest, we've not gone down the road of building a traditional award organization because of some of the factors involved under COVID-19, where there has been huge regulation around other exam boards, and we didn't want to that pressure and that burden so very early on. We then evolved into a commercial education establishment, but still driven by an government education uh, regulator who understands standards. So we're still doing everything that perhaps AQ and Pearson are doing, or others are doing in the vocational space, or those who are looking at apprenticeships. But we're just doing it without that burden of a regulator looking over us, whether it's Ofqual or Ofsted. And that's because we know that it's a long journey to establish a almost like a unicorn exam board. We can't get there overnight because COVID-19 hit us, and it was very difficult to get the millions of pounds to back the business model. So we're doing it ourselves through a commercial setup, and we're raising funds by doing things differently and selling products to the commercial market, but still educating these students and learners. It could be a weekend course or an evening course for them while they do their GCSE English. So maybe they want to brush up on public speaking while they do their GCSE English. They can take it online with Ignite Quals. So we're still feeding into standards. We have high standards because I understand standards. That's what I did for Ofqual. And that to get to that point, I couldn't cry about it. That oh, I should really be accepted like that by Ofqual because I'm one of them. I've been trained by them. No, it doesn't work like that. We were hit by COVID-19. There was job losses and there was lack of revenue in the education world because assessment stopped, everything stopped. So we knew we were coming through a point where there was a lot of turbulence. Shall we go through should we build a traditional award organization and go through Ofqual, or do we do something different and evolve? And because sometimes dreams have to evolve, and that's exactly why we've got Skills for Startups and EduEco Plus, and they all look at alternative education, alternative learning through commercial partnerships. So we partner up with other experts. It's got experts in customer service, experts in customer loyalty, all sorts. And we build these products and we test them through the roadshows. So our next roadshow is October the 24th. And we're looking at building startup CEOs. We're looking at leadership. We're looking at resilience. We're looking at people's health and mindsets. A plethora of deep dives. We've got some great leaders coming on board to share their startup journey. And all of this has happened because of my resilience. We wouldn't have got to this point. We've got 19 plus speakers this time round, and we've secured Google.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, so
Nice.
Google
Yeah.
Cloud are hosting us. So this is a massive achievement from worrying about regulation and whether we can do it as a similar to one of equivalent to an AQAP. So can we get there, or do we turn and do something completely different? We are completely different now, completely.
As you said about making sure you stand out from the crowd and being different to your competitors or everyone else in the
Yeah,
industry. I guess I can definitely see that, and having spoken,
yeah,
I
yeah.
just see that throughout the brand of Ignite Quals and the sister organizations. But no, it's been a really interesting chat. Like you said, Sophia, expect the unexpected. And I've got a question that my previous guest, Nathan Ade, has given to you. So I didn't tell you this before. I basically took it from Stephen Bartlett. Again, like sometimes you have to take, like people say R&D is rip off and duplicate. And that's what I've done with Stephen Bartlett's style. So he asks the next person to give a question. And your question from Nathan is to give you a little bit of heads up. We did touch on it, but we haven't really touched on it. So it's quite a different question to the rest of the conversation. But If there was some constructive criticism you could give to your culture that you come from, what would that constructive criticism be and why?
Um,
Quite a deep question.
yeah. uh, So my culture,
Yeah.
I think my criticism is that women shouldn't be in the background, and mothers and fathers need to treat their daughters equally to their sons.
Hun-
And that would then change the whole landscape for Asian women, I think. I think a lot of my underconfidence in the early years came from the fact that sometimes my father would say that you can't speak about this subject matter or there's no place for you here.
Mm.
And that really broke my heart because even back then as an 8-year old, hearing that in my household, I couldn't accept that. Because at school with my English teacher, she's building me up to be a great leader. At home, I'm nothing,
Yeah.
and I have to be in the background, and it's always about the sons, and it's not about the daughters. And I think Asian men need to admit that. They need to admit that they have unconscious bias against their own daughters and sisters.
I completely agree with that, by the way. I
It's
think.
wrong to not talk about it,
Mhm.
and I think that's the biggest criticism for my culture. And it's not okay to create an environment where women are in the background. It's not.
No, I think that's a theme of like a conversation around women and female entrepreneurs and females in general. I think, yeah, I would completely agree with that. From being from an Asian background as well, I can completely say that is something I would agree on. Like, I do think men and women, but particularly men, have to take accountability for and ensuring that, yeah, the women, that their wives, their daughters are not just at the background, but if anything, at the forefront of
Yeah,
what goes on in the house and what goes on in life. So
yeah,
I'm
ab
a complete advocate for that and
yeah,
completely agree. Sophia, it's your chance to pass on a question to my next guest, who is unconfirmed at the moment. But if you had to ask a question, and given that it's the theme of ethnically, we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging. We're talking about making change in society, being a voice for others. What if you had to form a question to pass
yeah,
on to someone else? What would that be?
yeah. I think my question would probably be, if you had a trauma or some obstacle, what was your reaction to that? And how did you change self, and essentially turned your life around?
Mm.
So
Okay. Yeah,
if you had a trauma or even just an obstacle, how did you use it to accomplish your achievement?
that's a brilliant question. Do you know, this is one thing I love about this segment when I get to ask a question. No one, yeah, has asked the same question. It's always been a different question. And it's always been on a
Good,
slightly different theme. So
good.
I really like that question. I think that's a all the questions are really deep as well, which I think is I like deep conversations. Like
Yeah,
really
but
digging into the skin.
this is it, Adash. You're attracting deep people.
I know.
You're deep. You attract what you are. You know that.
That's true. Yeah, I am a very like thought provoking person. I like
You
having these
are.
conversations.
I
I,
thought
I
that all my life.
I said a lot on the podcast that one of the reasons as well I set up ethnically is and why I think EDI is so important. Like as much as I'm a so-called diverse person, if you like to say, there is so much I do not know about EDI, and
Yeah,
I do not know so many things about so many different cultures, and
absolutely.
that's every conversation I have. I learn something new. I think about something different,
Yeah,
and I just like that deep thought about diversity, equity,
yeah,
inclusion, and society in general. So
absolutely. Yeah, and I think but part of and it's beautiful that there's so many angles to actually diversity and inclusion, but it just makes very difficult to find sometimes find solutions because it's so complex sometimes, and the landscape for ED&I is so complex. But I think there is no such thing as an ED&I expert. I think we're all
right.
experts.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, the term expert for me as well, I can get into a whole discussion
Yeah.
on that, but I just think no one really is an expert on it.
No one can possibly be an expert on ED&I, and I've always said this from day one, that when I was made national spokesperson for equity, diversity, inclusion for the Institute of Directors, and my first, I think, email was to say, my first meeting with a couple of officials from the IOD was, you can't possibly be an ED&I expert on all things though,
Mm.
because
Yeah.
there's more and more angles coming through as we progress into different dimensions. Now, artificial intelligence is coming in, and that's bringing in a whole new angle to ED&I. And nobody was really talking about belonging when I arrived. And I kept saying, I think it has to be just as important as part of our policies to look at how well do people belong. And it really doesn't matter who you are in belonging. It's belonging is more of a human perspective. You can still be employed, but not belong. You
Yeah,
can
that's so
have
true.
a function and go to team meetings and not belong. So let's look at the science behind that. And I think that's really now taken off. And other people are now starting to see my blogs and see my work on LinkedIn because everything's on LinkedIn for me.
Mm.
And they're starting to take the positives from what I'm saying and they've started to incorporate belonging now, which is very important.
Yeah. Actually, just the last thing before we wrap up. There is like one of my favorite quotes around ED&I, D&I, B. They say that diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance, and then belonging is choosing the song you dance to.
Yeah.
And I think that's my favorite quote when it comes to
I
D&I.
think that's really interesting.
Yeah, no, I just really like quote, and I thought I'd end on that because I guess it summarizes a lot of what we spoke about
Absolutely.
on today's episode. Sophia, it's been an absolute pleasure. You're an absolute inspiration. There's so much that I've learned from you, and I'm sure listeners listening would have learned from you, your story, what you're trying to achieve with Ignite Quals, and yeah, your ambitions for society in general. I think, yeah, it's been an amazing listen, amazing conversation. And I just want to thank you for your time on today's episode.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, Adash. Pleasure meeting you.
Oh, it's a pleasure meeting you. And yeah, that's the end of the episode. Stay tuned. Follow Ethnically on all social media platforms. And yeah, stay tuned for our next episode.